Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name is Ross, and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so today I'm bringing you some of the most important news that's going to be coming out in the very near future, and that is the rotation. Now, this is going to be the first of a series of videos. This is going to be the first impression, the cliff notes, the key points, if you will. We are going to go deeper. There's going to be a video about every set that we lose, going into great detail about exactly what we lose. There is going to be a video looking at decks which remain and decks which are going to be getting better and better because of this. Today, this is a cliff note. If you want a quick, this is what's happening because of the rotation, and I think at this stage you really should, this is something to which you should be listening and paying very close attention. We'll go into more detail later, but for now, this is the, shall we say, the quick reaction that I believe all of you guys need. Now, a couple things before we get going. The way the Pokemon trading card game works, for those of you that don't know, is that every year we have a number of sets that are legal. They will say a set, and then every set from there onwards is legal. So this year we have been in the format X and Y onwards. Every set from X and Y onwards has been legal. That is going to change. From now on, we will be playing with Primal Clash onwards, losing Phantom Forces, Furious Fists, Flash Fire, and X and Y. So we're going to look at the most important cards in these sets that we are going to be losing. We are also losing the X and Y promos 1 to 35. Only promo 36 and onwards is going to be legal, and as we're going to see, that will be relevant. And just a quick note on the rules of reprints. It's very, very simple. If one version of a card is legal, all versions of a card are legal. And the biggest thing that's going to happen with this rotation is Versus Seeker. It was printed in Phantom Forces. Phantom Forces is being rotated, ergo Versus Seeker should go. But we had the secret rare, the gold Versus Seeker, as a secret rare in Roaring Skies, which is still legal, therefore all Versus Seeker are still legal. It would be a very strange situation indeed if only the secret rare Versus Seeker was legal. That card would be worth an insane amount of money. The last caveat before we get going, there has been a Japanese reprint set. Now, I cannot say whether this is going to be released. We don't know. A lot of the cards, the most important cards that are being rotated out, would be kept with this Japanese set. We don't know is the honest answer. Now, we are used to reprint sets. Before Black and White, we had the set Call of Legends. Before X and Y, we had the set Legendary Treasures, both of which were reprint sets. So a reprint set before our first Sun and Moon set would not be out of the question. So, we got quite a lot to go through. Let's get rolling. Starting off with X and Y, we are losing Trevenant. That means the Trevenant deck is essentially gone. We are losing Yveltal EX. Now, this was reprinted as a promo, but the promo is number 8. That's lower than 36. That's gone as well. This is going to hurt dark decks. We are losing Aromatisse, that Pokemon that can move all that fairy energy round. So these fairy toolboxes that rely on moving rainbow energy and fairy energy to attack a variety of attackers, they are gone. And we're also losing Xerneas. Now, there was a promo X and Y05, which again is lower than 36, so it's not going to be legal, but it looks like we're getting a reprint in Steam Siege, so by the time the rotation really takes effect after Worlds, Steam Siege will be legal, so it's not actually getting rotated out, if that makes sense. We're also losing the card Hard Charm, which is useful for decks like Groudon just to stop some damage going on. We are losing Muscle Band, which has been a huge card, allowing any Pokemon to do an extra 20 damage, although fighting Fury Belt for basic Pokemon has pretty much replaced this, so it's less of a loss than it would have been in the past. We're also losing Roller Skate, which was a nice little trainer draw card, which, to be fair, has been less used of late. Now, this was actually reprinted in Phantom Forces, but as that set's being rotated as well, that's somewhat of a moot point. Moving into Flash Fire, we are losing Charizard EX, quite a nice fire attacker. Now, we're also losing Blacksmith, which makes Charizard EX worse, and we do have Emboar EX, which is not exactly the same, but a good enough replacement that if people wanted to play Charizard, they could play Emboar, and as a Pokemon, I think we can all agree that Emboar's cooler. And if you want to agree with me, let's stick a hashtag Emboar cooler in the comments. And yes, I am aware of the irony of saying that Emboar is cooler. We are losing the Pyroar. Now, Pyroar was really, really good when we had all these plasma decks, the basic decks. Pyroar was a very big deck. Then Hexmaniac came out. Hexmaniac turns off Pyroar's ability. And now Pyroar, that used to be so good at basically locking basic decks completely out of the game, all your opponent need do is drop a Hexmaniac or even a Garbodor, and bye-bye Pyroar. Not as good as it was, but still. We're losing Toxicroak EX, who, because of this poisoning attack, was quite fun as an Aegislash counter, and it was sometimes used by decks like Vespiquen Vileplume to get around Aegislash, so, maybe a bit of a loss. We've also lost Druddigon. He had his attack 90 damage if you've had a Pokemon KO'd the previous turn. That's pretty cool. It was used as a nice little revenge attacker, double colourless energy's quite easy to use, but again, this has not seen as much play as it did. We are also losing Miltank. 80 damage for 1 energy was pretty gosh darn good, but it's another one of these Pokemon which saw a bit of play here and there. Some decks that played Crobat played it, some Vileplume decks played it. It saw a bit of play a little while ago. It's fallen a bit out of favour. In terms of trainers, we're losing Blacksmith, which was a huge card that made fire decks good. The entire Entei deck really was made by something like Blacksmith. 2 fire energy from your discard to one of your Pokemon, it's incredibly powerful. We've also losing Sacred Ash. Now we've still got Super Rod, but that depends what you want. Super Rod is a better card because it's got the versatility, free in any combination of basic energy and Pokemon, but if all you want to do is recover Pokemon, Sacred Ash is better. 5 Pokemon back in your deck, it's just plain good. Now we're also losing Startling Megaphone, which was really the best way, or one of the best ways, one of 2, to get rid of your opponent's tools. As we are also losing Xerosic, we'll look in a minute, that's going to cause problems. Moving into Furious Fist, we are losing Seismitoad EX. I don't need to tell you much about Seismitoad. It has been one of the most important cards and attackers in the format since it was released. When we had that brief period with Lysander's Trump card legal, it was just everywhere. It took over UK Nationals to the point where we even had to kind of ban it before US Nationals, so it was less ridiculous. We've seen it played with Garbodor, we've seen it played with Crobat, recently we've seen it played with Manaphy in this Water Box deck. It was going to remain good for as long as it was in the format. Everybody said when Hypnotoxic Laser and Burbank City Gym got rotated, it would stop seeing play. That wasn't true. We are losing Dedenne. He had a cool little attack for 1 energy that could take down lightning weak attackers like Rayquaza EX, like Evil Tally X. It was never great, but he'll be missed. We're losing Lucario EX, a really good fighting attacker, although as we're going to see, we're losing most of the good fighting support as well. Yes, we have got Zygarde EX released now, but Zygarde's weak to Grass, Lucario's weak to Psychic. So like we saw Alex Hill do at US Nationals, you could have played both of these in a deck, and it would have really helped in terms of covering your weakness. Not an option anymore. We are losing Hawlucha, and I think Hawlucha, I've been saying this for a while, I think Hawlucha is one of these cards we are going to look back on as one of the most broken cards that we never really took advantage of. 60 for a single energy, free retreat. It's just really, really good. And as a starter in fighting decks, it was hard to find anything better. We're losing what I consider to be our best Eevee. Attach a basic energy, instantly evolve. It was really good. It got around cards like Archeops, although that's only legal in Expanded, and Expanded is staying as black and white on, so I suppose that's less of an issue. Still, it was the best Eevee. Now, in terms of supporters, it's really fighting support that we're losing. We are losing Fighting Stadium, which means you no longer get a free extra 20 damage against EXs for your fighting Pokemon. We are losing Focus Sash, that tool that meant you couldn't be one-hit KO'd. And with both Startling Megaphone and Xerosic being rotated, losing Focus Sash really, really hurts. And we're losing Corinna. Just that's such a good supporter card for setting up these fighting decks. Grab a fighting Pokemon and an item card, it was just insane. Now, weirdly, we're also losing Super Scoop Up, and this surprises me quite a lot. Super Scoop Up, like cards like Energy Switch, it's always in the format. It always gets reprinted. I would be very, very surprised if Super Scoop Up stayed out of our format for long, because we always get reprints of this card. So this is a little bit strange, and I expect this to be rectified. As it is, it's a really good card that lets you heal your Pokemon, reuse cards like Shaymin EX. A lot of people use it, and it will be missed. And finally, we're losing Phantom Forces. That means we're losing both Manectric and Megamanectric. They were the basis of their own deck. It did well at US Nationals this past weekend. It is a card that people will be sad to see go. And we're losing all of the Night Marchers. Joltik, Pumpkaboo, Lampert. All of these Night Marchers are gone. Unless we get the Japanese reprints, that means that Night March is gone, ladies and gentlemen. Night March, it's over. Now, weirdly, we are losing Crobat, this Pokemon that had the ability allowing you to do free damage counters or drop free damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. But we're not losing Golbat. Golbat was reprinted in the Generation set. Crobat was not. That's a little bit strange. So you can still use Golbat to drop the 2 damage counters, but you can't use Crobat to drop the extra 3. We are losing Malamar EX. Now, this is one of my favourite Pokemon that I like to chuck in random decks from time to time. Attach an energy, your opponent's active is asleep. Now, this comboed really, really nicely with Flareon EX in a deck which I don't think has seen as much play as it probably should have done. Attach the energy to Malamar, your opponent goes to sleep, and then you can just move the energy to Flareon. It's like attaching the energy to Flareon, except your opponent goes to sleep in the meantime. It's really quite fun. We are losing the Metal Lynx Bronzong, the card that made Metal decks so good, allowing you to attach that energy from the discard. Now, it was reprinted as a promo, indeed as the Phantom Forces pre-release promo, but again, the promo number is lower than 36. That is out as well. And we're losing Aegislash, this Pokemon that really helped against decks that rely on double colourless energy. Now, with cards like Hex Maniac, Aegislash really got weakened in the fact that, you know, your opponent could always just play a Hex Maniac and then go ahead and attack. And as we're going to mention, Garbodor becomes much, much better now. But ignoring all of that, again, in Metal decks, or really any deck that really struggled against other decks that relied on special energy, it was good. There was a time when Vespiquen Vileplume was becoming a bit of a pain. They only played 4 double colourless. They couldn't spam Versus Seeker because they would be trainer locking themselves with Vileplume. So you could put in an Aegislash and that would really, really help. It's why they had to tech in Toxicroak. And we're losing a lot of really good trainer cards from Phantom Forces. We're losing AZ, this card that allows you to pick up your Pokemon. It's basically like Super Scoop Up in supporter form, except you have to discard the cards attached to it. It heals, it reuses stuff like Shaymin, it's good. We're losing Battle Compressor. This is one of the very, very, very best cards we have had in the format since it got released. Being able to discard all of these cards from your deck. Decks like Vespiquen and Night March needed this to get the Pokemon in the discard. But there were other decks like Metal decks, you'd get it in the discard for the Bronzong, or indeed any deck could use it to discard supporter cards to reuse with Versus Seeker. It was one of the best and most versatile cards in the format. People are going to struggle to get over this one. We're losing Dimension Valley, the stadium card that lowered the attack cost by 1 colourless for all psychic Pokemon, and this was really, really good. It made stuff like, Night March is going anyway, but it made it good, and that's a problem. We're losing Enhanced Hammer, allowed you to discard special energy. As we're losing Xerosic as well, that's a bit of a problem. We're losing Headringer, that allowed you to firstly stop your opponent's EX putting on a tool of their own, 1 tool at a time, but also increase their attack cost, and that was a little bit of a pain for them. We're losing Robo-Sub, that card that just allowed you to, really stall a turn. My Regirock deck that I've spoken about at length on this channel, I really loved Robo-Sub in that deck. It wasn't used all that much, but decks like Groudon and Regirock, it's going to be sad that we don't have this anymore. We're losing Target Whistle, which I think is another one of those cards that is going to go down as underplayed. It allows you to grab one of your opponent's Pokemon or basic from their discard and put it onto their bench. Couple that with Lysander, and double Puzzle of Time for Target Whistle Lysander, always fun. It just meant that you could take easy prizes. Don't want to KO their active? Target Whistle, Lysander, KO the bench. It was only ever really Night March that made the most use of this. I think this should have seen more use. As I've mentioned a couple times, we are losing Xerosic. Now, given that we're losing Startling Megaphone, that means tools are looking pretty safe. Given that we're losing Enhanced Hammer and Headringer, that makes Energy Denial much more difficult. And finally, we're losing Mystery Energy. Some Trevenant decks would use this to give them easier retreat of their Trevenant. Didn't see a huge amount of play, but it saw a little bit of play. So a couple quick notes, and I've hinted at these, but let's make it nice and explicit. GARBODOR is still in the format. GARBODOR turns off all abilities when he has a tool attached. How are we supposed to get rid of tools, ladies and gentlemen? We don't have Tool Scrapper, that went a while ago because that was Dragons Exalted. We don't have Startling Megaphone, we don't have Xerosic. How are we supposed to get rid of these tools? GARBODOR's about to get really good. Now, we still have Crushing Hammer, but we are losing a whole bunch of other cards. Now, we are keeping Team Flagrant, that was reprinted in Generations, but we're losing Xerosic, we're losing Enhanced Hammer, we're losing Headringer. We can still go Energy Denial with Crushing Hammer and Team Flagrant, but it's a lot more difficult than it used to be. So just to finish off, I'm going to look at some of the biggest decks, and basically all the big decks, except maybe Darkrai, GARBODOR, Dragons. They all really get hurt by this. Firstly, Night March. It loses Joltik, Pumpkaboo, Lampent, Battle Compressor, Dimension Valley. That deck's gone. All the most useful cards are gone. The metal decks lose Bronzong. Without Bronzong, they are going to really struggle to be fast and consistent enough. Trevenant loses X and Y Trevenant. You now no longer have the Trainer Lock. Silent Fear on the Trevenant Break is a very good attack, but without Trainer Lock, this deck is nowhere near as good. It was a turn 1 Wally into Trevenant that made it such a good deck. Water Toolbox loses Seismitoad. Yeah, you've still got Manaphy and Regice and Glaceon and blah blah blah. You don't have Seismitoad, you don't have the Trainer Lock. Now you've still got Max Elixir, you've still got all these water Pokemon, the deck is still playable, but without Seismitoad it loses one of its really key pieces. Greninja only loses X and Y Greninja. You've still got the Breakpoint and the Break, so it's not the end of the world. You've still got Frogadier. It doesn't get hit as much as the other decks, but it's not what it loses that hurts Greninja. It's the fact that, as I just said, GARBODOR's about to be really gosh darn good. And as soon as you lose your abilities, ladies and gentlemen, Greninja becomes a terrible deck. Mega Manectric, well, it loses Manectric and Mega Manectric, so that's gone. And fighting decks, they lose the Stadium, they lose Corinna, they lose Focus Sash, they lose Lucario. What does this mean? It means, ladies and gentlemen, that all the best decks are just about getting neutered. They are getting underpowered, which is going to open the way for new decks in the future. You want to know what those decks are? Keep tuned, there will be another video about it. You want an in-depth look at all the good cards we've lost, not just the main ones, and a list of the cards we are keeping and which reprints will keep them in the set? Well, I've got 4 videos coming for you, one for each set, where we look in great detail about everything we've lost and everything we keep and why we keep it. This, ladies and gentlemen, this was just but a taste. This was the key points. This was the introduction. I hope I've explained the key points of the rotation well enough with all my coders and all of that, and hopefully this has whetted your appetite. But this is not all the key information, but over the next about 5 videos, I'm going to give you everything about the rotation. This is a good starting point, and I hope you've enjoyed it. There is a comment section. Tell me which cards you are going to miss from the rotation. Tell me what decks you think are going to be good after the rotation, or anything else that comes to mind. There's a like button, click it, it'll make me happy. There's a subscribe button, click it, it will make me happy. And if you've already clicked it, find a friend to subscribe on your behalf because, and this might shock you, it'll make me happy. The most important thing, as always, is to look after yourselves until next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.